Humiliated on camera, I cut them off and revealed the deed had my name. I made one call, an ultimatum that left them stunned and scrambling. The crystal vase slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor I'd polished just that morning. But it wasn't the sound of breaking glass that made my heart stop. It was what fell out of that beautiful, expensive-looking vase my son had presented to me with such ceremony just moments before. Dust. Actual dust. Not flowers, not a heartfelt gift, not even a cheap trinket from the dollar store. Dust from his vacuum cleaner bag, sprinkled with what looked like crumbs from his kitchen counter. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," he'd said with that smirk I'd grown to recognize over the past few years. "I thought you'd appreciate something that represents how much you mean to me now." I stood there in my living room, surrounded by shattered glass and the remnants of 37 years of unconditional love, watching my only child laugh at what he considered the perfect joke. But Marcus wasn't laughing alone. His wife Jennifer stood behind him, recording the entire thing on her phone, probably planning to post it on social media for all their friends to see. "Look how clever we are, humiliating the old woman on Mother's Day, the woman who sacrificed everything to give her son the world." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. You might be wondering how a relationship between a mother and son could deteriorate to this point. How someone could look at the woman who brought them into this world, who worked double shifts to pay for their college education, who mortgaged her home to help them buy their first house, and think that presenting her with literal garbage was appropriate. Well, let me take you back to where this all began, because what I did next would change both our lives forever. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why sometimes the only way to teach respect is to take away everything that makes disrespect possible. 3 years ago, I thought I was the luckiest mother in the world. Marcus had just gotten engaged to Jennifer, a lovely girl from what seemed like a good family. They were both working decent jobs, planning their future together, and Marcus still called me every Sunday to check in. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing, the way we had since he was small. He'd tell me about his work as a marketing coordinator. She'd tell me about her job at the dental office, and I'd listen with the pride that only a parent knows. My son was building a life, and I was so grateful to be part of it. But something shifted after their wedding. It started small, the way these things always do. Sunday phone calls became every other Sunday, then monthly, then only when they needed something. The conversations grew shorter, more transactional. "Mom, can you help us with the down payment on a bigger house?" "Mom, our car broke down and we're a little short this month." "Mom, Jennifer's going back to school and we could use some help with expenses." And like the fool I was, I said yes every single time. I said yes when they asked for $15,000 to help with their wedding, even though I'd already paid for the entire reception. I said yes when they needed $25,000 for their house down payment, taking out a second mortgage on my own home to make it happen. I said yes when they asked for monthly help with their expenses while Jennifer was in school, watching my retirement savings disappear one transfer at a time. Because that's what mothers do, right? We sacrifice, we give, we love unconditionally, expecting nothing in return but the knowledge that our children are happy and secure. The invitations to family gatherings started drying up around the same time. Suddenly, I was hearing about birthday parties and holiday celebrations through social media posts instead of personal invitations. When I asked Marcus about it, he'd make excuses. "It's just a small thing, Mom. Jennifer's family is already overwhelming. We didn't want you to feel obligated." But I could see the photos online, dozens of people celebrating while I sat alone in my house, the one I'd mortgaged to help them achieve their dreams. The breaking point should have been last Christmas when they forgot to invite me entirely. I spent December 25th watching Netflix and eating Chinese takeout, checking my phone every few minutes to see if they'd remember their mistake. They didn't. The next day, Jennifer posted pictures of their beautiful celebration with her entire extended family, captioned, "So grateful for family." I wasn't family anymore, apparently. I was just the woman who paid for their lifestyle. But even then, I made excuses for them. They're busy, they're young, they're building their own traditions. I told myself that this was normal, that children grow up and grow apart from their parents. I convinced myself that my hurt feelings were selfish, that a good mother should be happy just knowing her child was happy, even if she wasn't part of that happiness. The phone calls became even rarer after that. Months would pass without hearing Marcus's voice, and when he did call, it was always the same script. "Hi, Mom. Hope you're doing well. Listen, we're in a bit of a bind." The tone was always apologetic but urgent, like he was doing me a favor by giving me the opportunity to solve his problems with my money. And I always said yes, because what else does a mother do when her child needs help? I started keeping track, writing down every check I wrote, every transfer I made. Not because I expected to be paid back, but because the numbers were so staggering that I couldn't believe them myself. $68,000 over 3 years, more money than I'd spent on myself in a decade. My retirement account, which had taken me 40 years to build, was now less than half what it should have been. But my son and daughter-in-law were living in a beautiful house, driving nice cars, taking vacations to places I'd never been able to afford. The worst part wasn't the money, though. Money can be earned back, saved again, replaced with careful planning and time. The worst part was the growing realization that I had become nothing more than an ATM to my own child. When Marcus looked at me, he didn't see the woman who'd sat up all night when he was sick, who'd cheered at every little league game, who'd worked overtime to pay for his college textbooks. He saw a resource to be managed, a problem to be solved when his bank account ran low. I started declining some of their requests, testing to see what would happen if I said no. The reaction was swift and predictable. Marcus would get frustrated, Jennifer would get involved, and suddenly I'd be painted as selfish, as someone who didn't understand how hard things were for young people today. They'd remind me of how much they appreciated everything I'd done for them, how they'd pay me back someday when they were more established. But the guilt trips always worked, and I'd end up writing another check, making another transfer, depleting another piece of my future security. That's when I started noticing how they talked about me on social media. Not directly, of course. They were too smart for that. But Jennifer would post about entitled older people who expected gratitude just for doing what parents are supposed to do. Marcus would share articles about adult children who felt obligated to take care of parents who made poor financial decisions. The message was clear. I was the problem. I was the burden. I was the ungrateful mother who expected something in return for my sacrifices. The isolation was complete by then. My friends had grown tired of hearing about my son who never visited. My neighbors had stopped asking about Marcus after years of me making excuses for his absence. I was alone in the house I'd nearly lost helping him, surrounded by memories of a relationship that apparently meant nothing to the person I'd loved most in the world. So when Mother's Day arrived this year, I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a card if I was lucky. Perhaps a quick phone call between whatever more important activities filled their day. I certainly wasn't expecting a visit since Marcus hadn't set foot in my house in over 8 months. But at 10:30 in the morning, there he was at my front door with Jennifer beside him, both dressed up like they were going somewhere special after this obligatory stop. I was so happy to see him that I ignored the warning signs, the forced smiles, the way Jennifer kept checking her phone, the expensive gift bag that seemed too elaborate for people who'd forgotten me entirely the year before. I invited them in, offered coffee, asked about their lives with the desperate eagerness of a mother who hadn't seen her child in far too long. That's when Marcus presented me with the vase. It was beautiful, I'll give him that. Cut crystal that caught the morning light and threw rainbows across my living room walls. "This is for everything you've done for us, Mom," he said. And for just a moment, I thought maybe things were going to be different. Maybe they'd realized how they'd been treating me. Maybe this was their way of making amends. I should have known better. I should have recognized that smirk, the same one he'd worn as a teenager when he thought he'd outsmarted me. But hope makes fools of us all. And I was the biggest fool of all as I carefully lifted that beautiful vase, expecting to find flowers or chocolates, or maybe just empty space that represented their love. Instead, I found dust, literal dust and debris from their house, packaged up in expensive crystal and presented to me like it was precious. The woman who'd given them everything, reduced to a recipient of garbage. The mother who'd sacrificed her future for their present, deemed worthy of nothing more than the contents of their vacuum cleaner. But as I stood there, watching my son laugh at his own cruelty while his wife recorded my humiliation for posterity, something inside me finally snapped. Not broke, snapped, like a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long and suddenly found its breaking point. The hurt and disappointment I'd been carrying for 3 years crystallized into something much more powerful, something that would make them both understand exactly what they'd lost when they decided to treat their benefactor like trash. Because you see, there's something my son had forgotten in his eagerness to humiliate me. Something Jennifer had never bothered to learn about the woman whose money had funded their comfortable lifestyle. I wasn't just Marcus's mother. I wasn't just the lonely old lady they could manipulate and ignore. I was also the woman whose name was on the deed to their house. The silence that followed their laughter was deafening. Marcus and Jennifer stood there, waiting for me to cry, to beg, to ask them why they would do something so cruel. That's what they expected from the broken-down old woman they'd been manipulating for years. But I didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I smiled. Not the fake, desperate smile I'd been wearing for months whenever they graced me with their presence. This was something different, something that made Marcus's laughter die in his throat and caused Jennifer to lower her phone for the first time since they'd arrived. "Thank you," I said quietly, my voice steady as stone. "This is exactly what I needed." Marcus blinked, confusion replacing the cruel amusement on his face. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've finally shown me who you really are, both of you." I looked down at the dust scattered across my hardwood floor, mixed with fragments of crystal that caught the light like tiny diamonds. 37 years I've wondered if I was a good mother, if I'd raised you right, if I'd given you everything you needed to become a decent human being. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably, her designer heels crunching on the broken glass. "Mrs. Patterson, maybe you're overreacting a little. It was just a joke." "A joke?" I repeated the words like I was tasting something bitter. "You're right, Jennifer. It was a joke. The biggest joke of all is that I've been funding your lives while you've been laughing at me behind my back." Marcus stepped forward, and for just a moment, I saw a flicker of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Mom, look, maybe we went too far, but you have to understand how frustrating it is when you act so needy all the time. We have our own lives to live. Needy." The word hit me like a physical blow, but instead of crumbling, I felt something inside me harden into diamond. Needy. Is that what you call a mother who wanted to be part of her son's life? Who wanted to be invited to family gatherings? Who wanted more than a phone call when you needed money? "We appreciate everything you've done," Jennifer said quickly, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she used when she thought she was managing me. "But you have to understand that we're adults now. We can't be expected to include you in everything. Include me." I walked to my kitchen table where I kept my important papers, my footsteps steady despite the glass crunching under my shoes. "Let me show you something about inclusion." I pulled out the manila folder I'd been avoiding for weeks, the one my lawyer had prepared, but I'd been too afraid to open. "Do you know what this is?" Marcus glanced at Jennifer, who was now recording again, probably thinking this would make an even better story for their social media followers. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm doing what I should have done years ago." I opened the folder and pulled out the top document, the one with both our names printed in official legal text. "This is the deed to your house, Marcus. The house I helped you buy with $25,000 of my retirement money. The house I co-signed for when your credit wasn't quite good enough. The house where you've been living while treating me like garbage." The color drained from Marcus's face. "Mom, you can't be serious about this." "Oh, but I am serious. Deadly serious." I pulled out the next document, my hands surprisingly steady. "This is the power of attorney agreement you signed when we set up the mortgage. You remember, don't you? You said it was just a formality, that it would make the paperwork easier if I could handle things when you were busy." Jennifer's phone wavered in her hands. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that legally, I have the right to make decisions about this property, including the decision to sell it." I looked directly at Marcus, watching understanding dawn in his eyes like a terrible sunrise. "I'm saying that your little joke just cost you your home." The room went silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock my mother had left me, the same clock that had counted down the minutes of my lonely Mother's Days for the past 3 years. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "Wouldn't I?" I walked to my desk and pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I'd memorized but never thought I'd use. "Let me tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to call my real estate agent, the same one who helped me buy this house 40 years ago when I was a single mother working 2 jobs to give you a better life. I'm going to tell her to put your house on the market immediately." "Mom, please, you're being irrational." Marcus's voice cracked like it used to when he was 12 and caught in a lie. "We can talk about this. We can work something out." "Work something out?" I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. It wasn't bitter or angry. It was relieved. "Marcus, we worked something out 3 years ago when I gave you everything I had. We worked something out every time you called asking for money. We worked something out every time I said yes while you said no to including me in your life." Jennifer finally found her voice, sharp with panic. "You can't just sell our house because your feelings got hurt. That's not how the world works." "Actually, Jennifer, that's exactly how the world works when you bite the hand that feeds you." I dialed the number, my finger hovering over the call button. "When you humiliate someone who holds your mortgage, when you treat your benefactor like she's disposable." "Benefactor?" Marcus's voice rose to a pitch I hadn't heard since his teenage years. "You're our mother. You're supposed to help us. That's what parents do." "Parents also deserve respect, Marcus. They deserve gratitude. They deserve to be treated like human beings, not ATMs." I pressed the call button and listened to it ring. But most importantly, they deserve better than being given dust on Mother's Day. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Sandra Chen Real Estate. This is Sandra." "Sandra, it's Helen Patterson. I need to put a property on the market immediately." I could feel Marcus and Jennifer staring at me in horror, but I kept my voice calm and professional. "Yes, it's the house on Maple Street, the one I helped my son purchase 3 years ago." Sandra's voice carried through the phone, loud enough for them to hear. "Of course, Helen. Are you looking for a quick sale or do you want to maximize the return?" "Quick sale," I said without hesitation. "I want it listed today if possible. Price it to move fast." Marcus lurched forward, reaching for my phone, but I stepped back, continuing my conversation with Sandra while my son and his wife watched their comfortable world crumble around them. "The market's hot right now," Sandra was saying. "Houses in that neighborhood are selling within days, sometimes for cash offers above asking price. If you're serious about moving quickly, I can have it listed by this afternoon." "Perfect. I'll meet you there in 2 hours to sign the paperwork." I ended the call and looked at my son, this stranger who shared my blood but not my values. "Congratulations, Marcus. You got exactly what you wanted. You're finally free from your needy mother." "Mom, stop." His voice broke completely now, and for a moment he looked like the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, convinced they were the most beautiful flowers in the world. "We can fix this. We can make this right." Fix this?" I gestured to the dust still scattered across my floor. "How exactly do you fix 3 years of disrespect? How do you fix forgetting your mother exists until you need money? How do you fix giving someone literal garbage and thinking it's funny?" Jennifer stepped forward, her earlier arrogance replaced by desperation. "Mrs. Patterson, please. We have nowhere else to go. Our lease on the apartment ended when we moved into the house. All our stuff is there. Our whole life is there. Then I suggest you start packing." I walked to my front door and held it open, the same door I'd opened countless times hoping to see my son's face. "You have 30 days from when the house sells to find somewhere else to live. That's more consideration than you showed me when you decided I wasn't worth including in your family." Marcus stood in my doorway, tears streaming down his face, looking more like a lost child than the successful adult he claimed to be. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't do this." "I'm sorry too, Marcus. I'm sorry it took me this long to realize that love without respect isn't love at all. It's just enabling." I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the boy I'd raised in his desperate eyes. "I'm sorry I taught you that you could treat people badly as long as you needed something from them. I'm sorry I showed you that a mother's love has no boundaries, even when those boundaries are necessary for both our dignity." He reached for me then, the way he used to when nightmares woke him in the middle of the night and only his mother could make the scary things go away. But I stepped back, my resolve stronger than my maternal instincts for the first time in 3 years. "The house will be on the market by evening. I said quietly. You'll want to start looking for somewhere else to live. And Marcus, next Mother's Day, save your dust for someone who deserves it. I closed the door on their shocked faces and turned the deadbolt with a satisfying click. Through the window, I watched them stand on my porch for several minutes, probably hoping I'd change my mind, hoping the mother who'd never said no would suddenly appear and take back everything I'd just said. But that mother was gone, buried under 3 years of manipulation and humiliation, finally laid to rest by a vase full of dust on Mother's Day morning. The next few hours passed in a blur of righteous fury and methodical planning. I swept up the broken crystal and dust, each fragment catching the light like tiny reminders of my son's cruelty. But instead of throwing the pieces away, I carefully collected them in a small jewelry box. Evidence, I told myself, a reminder of the moment I finally found my backbone. Sandra arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, her silver sedan pulling into the driveway of the house I'd helped Marcus buy. She was the same age as me, a woman who'd built her real estate empire one satisfied client at a time, and she looked at me with the kind of understanding that only comes from decades of watching families implode over money and property. "Helen," she said, embracing me on the front porch, "I have to ask, are you absolutely certain about this?" I looked through the front window at the living room where I'd spent Christmas mornings alone while my son celebrated with his wife's family. At the kitchen table where I'd written check after check, depleting my future to fund their present. At the master bedroom where Marcus had been conceived 38 years ago, back when I thought love and sacrifice were the same thing. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Sandra nodded and pulled out her tablet. The comparable sales in this neighborhood are impressive. Houses similar to this one have been selling for anywhere between $450,000 to $500,000. Given the updates they've made with your money, we could probably get $475,000, maybe $500,000 if we're patient. I told you, Sandra, price it to move fast. I want them out of my life, not maximum profit. She typed notes on her screen. $425,000 then. That'll have offers by tomorrow, closed within 2 weeks if we get a cash buyer. She looked up at me seriously. "Helen, once I list this, there's no going back. Your son will lose his home. My son lost his mother 3 years ago when he decided money was more important than family. Now he gets to learn what that actually costs." We spent the next hour documenting everything. Photos of each room, measurements, notes about the granite countertops I'd paid for, and the hardwood floors Marcus had insisted were essential for resale value. Sandra worked with professional efficiency, but I could see her stealing glances at me, probably wondering what could drive a mother to such extreme measures. "The listing will go live at 6 tonight," she said as we finished. "I'll need you to sign these disclosure forms, and then we wait for the phone to ring." My phone was already ringing as we walked to our cars. Marcus's number flashed on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. Then Jennifer's number, which I also ignored. Then a number I didn't recognize, probably one of their friends recruited to plead their case. By evening, I'd received 17 missed calls and 12 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. The texts started apologetic and quickly devolved into anger, then back to begging, like watching someone cycle through the stages of grief in real time. "Mom, please call me back. We need to talk about this. I know we messed up, but this is crazy. You're destroying our lives over a stupid joke. How's that fair? We're sorry, okay? We're really, really sorry. Please don't sell our house. I can't believe you're doing this to your own son. What would Dad think?" That last message made my hands shake with rage. What would Dad think? My husband had been dead for 8 years, taken by cancer when Marcus was 29, and still treated me like I mattered. Robert would think his son had become a stranger, a man who could look at his mother's sacrifice and see only weakness to exploit. At 6:15, Sandra called. "It's live, Helen. The listing went up 15 minutes ago and I've already had 3 inquiries." I walked to my computer and pulled up the real estate website, typing in the address I'd memorized from writing so many checks. There it was, the house I'd helped create, now displayed for the world to see with a bright red "For Sale" banner across the photos. The description Sandra had written was clinical and professional. Motivated seller, beautifully maintained 3-bedroom home in desirable Maple Street neighborhood. Recent updates include granite countertops, hardwood flooring throughout, and professionally landscaped yard, priced for quick sale. What it didn't say was that every update mentioned had been funded by a mother's retirement savings, that the granite countertops represented 6 months of my Social Security checks, that the hardwood floors had cost me the vacation to Europe I'd been planning since Robert died. My doorbell rang at 7:30. Through the peephole, I could see Marcus alone on my porch, no longer the arrogant man who'd laughed at my humiliation that morning. His shoulders were slumped, his expensive shirt wrinkled, his face red and puffy like he'd been crying. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Mom, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this." His voice was hoarse, probably from hours of arguing with Jennifer about whose fault this was. "We'll pay you back. Every penny. I'll get a second job. We'll sell Jennifer's car, whatever it takes." "Pay me back with what? You've been living paycheck to paycheck despite my help for 3 years. What's changed?" He ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture he'd used as a child when caught in a lie. "I'll figure it out. I'll make it work. Just, please don't sell our house. It's not your house, Marcus. It never was. I'm on the deed. I'm on the mortgage. I'm the one who's been making it possible for you to live there." I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "You wanted to be independent so badly, to live your own life without your needy mother interfering. Congratulations. You're about to get exactly what you asked for." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "Do I? Because this morning you made it very clear what I mean to you. Dust, Marcus. You thought I was worth dust." I pulled out my phone and showed him the real estate listing. 17 people have looked at this online in the past hour. Sandra says we'll have offers by tomorrow. His face crumpled. "Mom, I was angry. Jennifer and I have been fighting about money, about her going back to school, about everything. I took it out on you and that was wrong, but you can't destroy our lives because I made one stupid mistake." "One mistake?" I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "Marcus, the mistake wasn't the dust. The mistake was 3 years of treating me like an ATM. The mistake was forgetting I exist unless you need money. The mistake was recording my humiliation for your entertainment. We deleted the video. Jennifer deleted it right after we left here." "How generous of you." I started to close the door, but he put his hand against it, desperation making him bold. "What do you want me to do? What will it take to make this right?" The question hung between us like a challenge. What did I want? For 3 years, I'd wanted simple things: phone calls that weren't about money, invitations to family gatherings, acknowledgement that I was more than just a source of emergency funds, but it was too late for those things now. The damage was done, the trust was broken, the relationship was over. "I want you to understand consequences," I said quietly. "I want you to learn that actions have real costs. I want you to experience what it feels like when someone you depend on decides you're not worth their consideration." "So this is revenge? This is education." I removed his hand from my door. "The house will sell, Marcus. You'll find somewhere else to live. And maybe eventually you'll understand that the woman who gave you everything deserved better than dust on Mother's Day." I closed the door and listened to him pound on it for several minutes, calling my name, making promises he'd never intended to keep even if I'd believed them. Eventually, the pounding stopped, and I heard his car start in my driveway. But this was just the beginning. Because as I would soon discover, Marcus and Jennifer weren't going to accept their fate quietly. They had their own plans, their own ideas about how to handle their desperate situation, and those plans would force me to show them that their needy old mother was far more resourceful than they'd ever imagined. The real war was just getting started. The war escalated faster than I expected. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing constantly with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Friends of Marcus and Jennifer, no doubt, recruited to plead their case or try to guilt me into changing my mind. I let them all go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me around 10 o'clock, and I started listening to the messages. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Rebecca Martinez. I work with Jennifer at the dental office. She's told me about your situation, and I really think you should reconsider. They're good people who made a mistake." "Ifro?" "Helen, it's Pastor Williams from Marcus's church. I understand there's been some family conflict, and I'd love to mediate a conversation between you all." "Ma'am, this is David Chen, Jennifer's brother." What you're doing is elder abuse in reverse. You can't just destroy people's lives because you're upset. Elder abuse in reverse. The phrase made me laugh out loud, sitting alone in my kitchen with my morning coffee. These people had no idea what abuse looked like. They hadn't watched their life savings disappear while being treated like an inconvenience. They hadn't been excluded from family gatherings while funding the very celebrations they weren't invited to attend. Sandra called at 11:15, her voice crackling with excitement. "Helen, you're not going to believe this. We have 3 solid offers already, all above asking price. One's a cash offer for $430, no contingencies, 10-day close." My heart hammered against my ribs. It was really happening. In 10 days, Marcus would be homeless, and I would finally be free from the financial stranglehold he'd held over my retirement. "Accept the cash offer," I said without hesitation. "Are you sure? The other 2 are higher, but they need financing approvals and inspections. The cash offer is clean, but—" "Sandra, I told you I want this done quickly and permanently. Accept the cash offer." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen looking around at the house I'd lived in for 40 years, the house I'd nearly lost helping Marcus buy his own home. Everything looked different now, brighter somehow. The morning sun streaming through my windows seemed warmer. The coffee tasted richer. Even the silence felt different, not lonely anymore, but peaceful. That peace was shattered at 1:30 when someone started pounding on my front door with the kind of violence that rattled the frame. Through the peephole, I could see Jennifer's face, red and twisted with rage, her perfectly styled hair disheveled like she'd been pulling at it. "Open this door right now!" she screamed, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "We know you're in there, you vindictive old witch!" I stepped back from the peephole, my heart racing. In 3 years of knowing Jennifer, I'd never seen her lose composure like this. She'd always been so controlled, so calculating in her manipulation. But desperation, it seemed, had stripped away her mask entirely. The pounding continued, accompanied by shouting that would have made a sailor blush. "You can't do this to us! We have rights! That's our home!" I picked up my phone and dialed 911, my hands surprisingly steady despite the chaos at my front door. 911, what's your emergency? "This is Helen Patterson at 42 Elm Street. Someone is threatening me and trying to break down my door." "Are you in immediate danger, ma'am?" Through the window, I could see Jennifer kicking at my door now, her designer heels leaving scuff marks on the wood my late husband had painted just before he died. "I believe so, yes. Officers are en route. Stay on the line with me." The dispatcher kept me talking while Jennifer's tantrum continued outside. Where was Marcus during all this? Was he sitting in the car, letting his wife do the dirty work? Or had he finally grown a spine and refused to participate in this public meltdown? My question was answered when I heard a car door slam and Marcus's voice joined the chaos. "Jennifer, stop! You're making this worse!" "Worse?" Her voice pitched even higher, like a tea kettle about to explode. "How could this be worse, Marcus? We're losing our house because you had to play your stupid joke on Mommy Dearest. This isn't helping. The neighbors are watching, people are recording. Do you want this all over social media?" The irony was beautiful. The same couple who'd recorded my humiliation for their entertainment were now worried about their own public embarrassment. I moved to my living room window and peered through the blinds. Sure enough, Mrs. Chen from across the street was standing in her yard with her phone out, probably live streaming the whole spectacle to her Facebook friends. "I don't care who's watching," Jennifer shrieked. "That crazy old bat is stealing our home." "She's not stealing it, she owns it. Legally, she has every right to—" "Don't you dare take her side! This is your fault, Marcus! Your mother, your stupid family drama, your inability to stand up to her manipulation." My manipulation. The woman who'd given them everything was now the manipulator, while the couple who'd taken my money and excluded me from their lives were the victims. The mental gymnastics were impressive, even for Jennifer. The sound of sirens cut through their argument, and I watched through my window as a police cruiser pulled up to my house. 2 officers got out, both young enough to be my grandchildren, both wearing the patient expressions of people who dealt with domestic disputes every day. "Ma'am, we need you to step away from the door," I heard one of them say to Jennifer. "We've had reports of threatening behavior." "She's the threat!" Jennifer pointed at my house like it was harboring a terrorist. "She's trying to make us homeless. We have a baby coming." A baby. This was news to me, and judging by Marcus's shocked expression, it was news to him too. Jennifer had just played what she thought was her trump card, the guaranteed guilt trip that would make any grandmother cave to her demands. But I'd learned something important over the past 24 hours. I'd learned that guilt was only effective when you felt responsible for someone else's choices, and I was done feeling responsible for Marcus and Jennifer's problems. The officer was talking to Jennifer now, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, regardless of your personal situation, you cannot threaten or harass other people. This is private property, and the homeowner has asked you to leave." "Homeowner?" Jennifer's voice cracked. "She doesn't live here. This is our house. We've been paying the mortgage for 3 years." I almost felt sorry for her as the officer explained the legal reality she'd been too entitled to understand. "Ma'am, according to our records, the property owner is Helen Patterson. If she wants you to leave her property, you need to leave." Through my window, I watched Marcus try to calm his wife down while she spiraled further into hysteria. "You don't understand," she kept saying to the officers. "She's doing this to hurt us. She's taking away our home because her feelings got hurt. Because her feelings got hurt." 3 years of financial exploitation, social exclusion, and systematic disrespect reduced to hurt feelings. The woman who'd recorded my humiliation for entertainment was now painting herself as the victim of an emotional old lady's revenge. One of the officers approached my front door and knocked politely. "Mrs. Patterson? I'm Officer Johnson with the Spokane Police Department. Could we speak with you for a moment?" I opened the door, noting how different this felt from Jennifer's violent pounding just minutes before. Officer Johnson was maybe 30 years old, with kind eyes and the sort of respectful demeanor that suggested he'd been raised by parents who'd taught him to honor his elders. "Ma'am, we understand there's some sort of property dispute happening here. Can you help us understand the situation?" I explained everything calmly and factually. The years of financial support, the social exclusion, the Mother's Day humiliation, and my legal right to sell the property I'd helped purchase and still owned. Officer Johnson listened without interruption, occasionally glancing over his shoulder at Jennifer, who was now sitting on my front steps crying dramatically while Marcus paced behind her. "Do you have documentation of your ownership?" Officer Johnson asked. I showed him the deed, the mortgage papers, and the power of attorney agreement Marcus had signed. The officer reviewed everything carefully, then nodded with the satisfaction of someone who'd dealt with similar family financial disasters before. "Bon and suif." "Ma'am, you're well within your legal rights here. This is your property, and you can sell it whenever you choose." He looked toward Marcus and Jennifer with something that might have been sympathy or might have been professional disgust. "However, I'd recommend you consider changing your locks and maybe installing a security system. Family disputes over money can escalate quickly." After the officers left and Marcus dragged his still sobbing wife to their car, I stood in my living room feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. Not the cruel, manipulative power that Jennifer wielded with her guilt trips and social exclusion. This was the power that came from finally standing up for yourself, from refusing to be anyone's doormat, from drawing lines in the sand and actually defending them. My phone rang again, and this time I recognized the number. My sister Rosa calling from Phoenix, probably having heard about the drama through some family network I wasn't even aware existed. Helen? What in God's name is happening up there? I just got off the phone with cousin Maria, who heard from her daughter that Marcus is posting on Facebook about you selling his house. I explained the situation to Rosa, starting with the dust-filled vase and ending with Jennifer's public meltdown on my front lawn. Rosa listened in the way only sisters can, with complete understanding and growing outrage. "That little bastard gave you dust for Mother's Day?" Rosa's voice could have melted steel. "After everything you've done for him?" "Helen, I always told you that boy was taking advantage, but this is beyond anything I imagined. I should have listened to you years ago." "Damn right you should have, but better late than never. You're selling the house?" "Sold. Cash offer, 10-day close. They'll be out by the end of the month." Rosa was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear her calculating the implications. "Helen, are you prepared for what comes next? Because this won't end with them just accepting defeat and moving on. People like Jennifer don't go quietly." She was right, of course. I'd fired the first shot in this war, but Jennifer and Marcus weren't going to surrender without a fight. They'd spent 3 years seeing me as a weak, manageable resource. The idea that I could fight back, that I could win, was probably incomprehensible to them. What do you think they'll do? Everything they can think of. They'll try to turn other family members against you. They'll probably claim you're having some kind of mental breakdown. Jennifer might even try to get social services involved, claim you're not competent to make financial decisions. Rosa paused. Helen, do you have a good lawyer? Helen, do you? I hadn't even thought about needing legal representation beyond the real estate transaction. In my mind, this was simple property law. I owned the house, I could sell the house, end of story. But Rosa was reminding me that family warfare rarely stayed within the bounds of simple logic. I should probably get one. You should definitely get one. And Helen, document everything. Every phone call, every threat, every attempt at manipulation. If this gets ugly, and it probably will, you'll need evidence of their behavior. After I hung up with Rosa, I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and started writing. Every detail I could remember from the past 3 years, starting with the first time Marcus had asked for money and ending with Jennifer's breakdown on my front lawn. The pattern was clear when laid out chronologically. The gradual escalation of demands, the increasing disrespect, the systematic exclusion from family events while my financial support continued. By evening, I'd filled 12 pages with single-spaced handwriting, a comprehensive record of how a loving mother-son relationship had devolved into financial exploitation. Reading it back was like watching a horror movie where you wanted to scream at the victim to run, except I was both the victim and the audience. My doorbell rang at 8:30, just as I was finishing my documentation project. Through the peephole, I could see a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged and professional-looking, carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of serious expression that suggested official business. Mrs. Patterson? My name is Linda Walsh. I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services. I've received some concerning reports about your recent behavior, and I was hoping we could have a conversation. And there it was. Rosa had called it perfectly. Jennifer and Marcus, faced with the reality that they couldn't intimidate or guilt me into submission, had escalated to the nuclear option. They were trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. I smiled and opened the door wider. Of course, Ms. Walsh, please come in. I've been expecting someone like you. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time in 3 years, I was ready to fight. And unlike my son and daughter-in-law, I had something they'd never understood the value of: the truth. Ms. Walsh settled into my living room chair with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd conducted hundreds of these interviews. She pulled out a tablet and stylus, her movements deliberate and professional. I offered her coffee, which she declined, and took my seat across from her with the confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. Mrs. Patterson, I want to start by saying that these visits are routine when we receive reports of concern. There's no judgment here, just an opportunity for us to understand your current situation. Her voice carried that careful neutrality social workers perfected over years of dealing with family crises. What exactly were you told? I asked, genuinely curious about how Marcus and Jennifer had framed their complaint. Ms. Walsh consulted her tablet. The report suggests that you may be making impulsive financial decisions that could indicate cognitive decline or emotional distress. Specifically, that you've suddenly decided to sell property that would leave family members homeless, and that this decision was made in response to a minor family disagreement. Minor family disagreement. I almost laughed at the clinical language that reduced 3 years of exploitation to a simple misunderstanding between relatives. Ms. Walsh, would you like to see the documentation I've prepared regarding this minor disagreement? She looked surprised but nodded. Any information you'd like to share would be helpful. I handed her the 12 pages I'd written that afternoon, watching her expression change as she read through the chronological account of financial manipulation and social exclusion. Her professional mask slipped slightly as she absorbed the details of missed holidays, ignored phone calls, and the steady drain of my retirement savings. This is quite comprehensive, she said after several minutes. You've documented specific dates, amounts, and incidents going back 3 years. Someone suffering from cognitive decline probably couldn't organize information this systematically, don't you think? I pulled out my financial records, the deed to the house, and the power of attorney agreement. I've also prepared all the legal documentation showing my ownership of the property in question. Ms. Walsh spent another 20 minutes reviewing everything, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated she understood exactly what had been happening in my family. When she finally set down the papers, her professional demeanor had shifted to something warmer, more personal. Mrs. Patterson, in my 15 years doing this work, I've seen many cases of financial elder abuse. What you've described and documented fits that pattern perfectly. She looked at me directly. The people who filed this report are not the victims here. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by vindication. A trained professional who specialized in protecting vulnerable adults had just confirmed what I'd known in my heart. I wasn't crazy, vindictive, or incompetent. I was someone who'd finally found the strength to stop being victimized. What happens now? I asked. Now I file a report stating that you are completely mentally competent, that your financial decisions are reasonable responses to documented abuse, and that the complaint appears to have been filed in bad faith by the actual perpetrators. She closed her tablet and stood up. Mrs. Patterson, I hope you have good legal representation, because this probably won't end here. After Ms. Walsh left, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. The adrenaline of standing up for myself was wearing off, replaced by the sobering realization that this war was far from over. Marcus and Jennifer had already tried intimidation, public humiliation, and false accusations of mental incompetence. What would they try next? The answer came at 6:45 the next morning when my doorbell rang insistently, followed immediately by pounding that had become depressingly familiar. But this time, when I looked through the peephole, I saw not just Marcus and Jennifer, but an elderly couple I recognized from Jennifer's social media posts. Her parents, apparently brought in as reinforcements for whatever new strategy they'd devised. I opened the door but kept the chain latch engaged, creating a gap just wide enough for conversation, but not wide enough for unwanted entry. What do you want? Jennifer's father, a distinguished-looking man in his 70s, stepped forward with the authoritative bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Robert Chen, Jennifer's father. I think we need to have a serious conversation about this situation. There's nothing to discuss. The house is sold, the papers are signed, and your daughter and son-in-law have until the end of the month to find somewhere else to live. Now see here. Mr. Chen's voice carried the imperious tone of a man who'd never been told no by someone he considered beneath his social status. You're being completely unreasonable. Jennifer is carrying our first grandchild, and you're putting both mother and baby at risk with this vindictive behavior. So the pregnancy announcement from yesterday's police visit hadn't been a desperate lie after all. Jennifer really was pregnant, and now her parents were here to weaponize that fact against me. The strategy was predictable but effective. Most grandmothers would crumble at the thought of putting a pregnant woman on the streets. But most grandmothers hadn't spent 3 years being systematically excluded from their son's life while funding his wife's lifestyle. Congratulations on the pregnancy, I said evenly. I'm sure you'll make wonderful grandparents, much better than I was allowed to be. Jennifer's mother, a thin woman with perfectly styled silver hair, spoke for the first time. Mrs. Patterson, surely you understand that children sometimes make mistakes, but family means forgiveness. It means putting aside pride for the sake of love. Family means forgiveness. The words hit exactly where they were intended to land, in that soft spot every mother carries for her child's well-being. For just a moment, I wavered. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe the pregnancy changed everything. Maybe family really did mean endless forgiveness, regardless of how badly that forgiveness was abused. Then I remembered the dust, the literal garbage my son had given me on Mother's Day while his wife recorded my humiliation. I remembered 3 years of being treated like an ATM with legs, valued only for my ability to solve their financial problems. I remembered sitting alone on Christmas while they celebrated with the family that actually mattered to them. You're right, Mrs. Chen. Family does mean forgiveness. It also means respect, inclusion, and gratitude. Your daughter and my son forgot those parts. I started to close the door, but Mr. Chen pushed against it, his face reddening with indignation. You can't do this to them. Jennifer is family now, and family takes care of each other. Family. I looked at this man who'd raised a daughter capable of recording someone's humiliation for entertainment. Mr. Chen, your daughter spent 3 years making sure I understood that I wasn't family. I was excluded from holidays, ignored except when money was needed, and ultimately presented with dust on Mother's Day as a token of how much I meant to them. Jennifer finally spoke, her voice carrying a new note of desperation. We made mistakes, okay? We admit that. But you can't punish an innocent baby for our mistakes. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply no longer subsidizing the lifestyle of people who treat me with contempt. I looked directly at Jennifer's parents. Your daughter and my son are both college-educated adults with decent jobs. They're perfectly capable of finding housing they can actually afford without my financial support. But the baby, Mrs. Chen said softly, surely you can't want your grandchild to be homeless. My grandchild. The phrase hung in the air like a question mark, loaded with implications and expectations. This baby would be my biological grandchild, the continuation of my family line, the innocent victim of their parents' choices, and my response to those choices. For a moment, I felt the old familiar pull of guilt and obligation. The voice that had always whispered that good mothers sacrifice everything for their children, that family peace was worth any price, that love meant never saying no when your child needed help. But then I thought about what kind of grandparent I would be if I taught this child that actions don't have consequences, that you could treat people badly as long as you needed something from them, that love without respect was sufficient. What kind of legacy would I be creating if I showed this baby that manipulation and guilt were effective tools for getting what you wanted? My grandchild won't be homeless, I said quietly. Their parents will find appropriate housing that they can afford on their own incomes. They'll learn to live within their means instead of depending on other people's retirement savings. And maybe, just maybe, they'll learn to treat people with the respect that makes someone want to be part of their family. Mr. Chen's face had progressed from red to purple. This is outrageous. You're destroying your own family over hurt feelings. No, Mr. Chen. My family was destroyed 3 years ago when your daughter and my son decided that my money was more valuable than my presence. I'm just refusing to keep funding the people who threw me away. I closed the door firmly and turned the deadbolt, leaving them on my porch to argue among themselves about strategy and blame. Through the window, I watched them gesture angrily at my house before finally retreating to their car. But I knew this wasn't over. The pregnancy had given them new ammunition, and they'd be back with different tactics, different pressure points, different ways to try to guilt me into submission. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Rose's number appeared on the screen, and I answered with relief at hearing from someone who actually cared about my well-being. Helen, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I need to ask you something important. Rose's voice carried the serious tone she used for life-changing discussions. Are you prepared to go the distance with this? Because once you've drawn this line in the sand, there's no going back to the way things were. What do you mean? I mean, Marcus will never forgive you for this. Even if he eventually understands why you did it, even if he learns to respect you, the relationship you had before is gone forever. You're choosing your dignity over your son, and that's a choice you'll have to live with for the rest of your life. The weight of Rose's words settled over me like a heavy blanket. She was right, of course. Whatever happened next, whatever Marcus and Jennifer learned from this experience, I would always be the mother who'd made her son homeless. I would always be the grandmother who'd chosen principle over family unity. But I would also be the woman who'd finally stood up for herself. The mother who'd taught her son that respect wasn't optional. The grandmother who'd shown her future grandchild that dignity mattered more than peace at any price. Rosa, for 3 years I chose my son over my dignity, and it nearly destroyed me. I became someone I didn't recognize, someone who accepted cruelty as the price of maintaining a relationship that only existed when money was needed. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the garden Robert and I had planted together 40 years ago. I'd rather be alone with my self-respect than surrounded by people who see me as nothing more than a convenient resource. Then you're stronger than I thought you were, Rosa said softly. And you're going to need that strength, because this is going to get worse before it gets better. She was right about that too. Over the next week, the attacks escalated in ways I couldn't have imagined. My mailbox was stuffed with cards and letters from people I'd never met, all of them explaining why I should reconsider my decision. Church members, co-workers of Jennifer's, even strangers who'd apparently heard about the situation through social media networks. The letters ranged from gentle persuasion to outright condemnation. Some painted me as a confused old woman being manipulated by unscrupulous real estate agents. Others portrayed me as a vindictive monster who cared more about revenge than family. The most creative one suggested I was suffering from dementia and needed immediate intervention from mental health professionals. But the most painful letter came from someone whose opinion actually mattered to me. My nephew David, Marcus's cousin and the son of my late brother, wrote 3 pages explaining how disappointed he was in my behavior and how his father would be ashamed of what I'd become. The words cut deep because David had always been like a second son to me, especially after his father died when he was 16. I'd helped pay for his college education too, though he'd always been grateful and respectful about it. His letter felt like a betrayal that rivaled Marcus's dust-filled vase. I called him that evening, my hands shaking as I dialed the number. "Aunt Helen." David's voice was cold, formal, nothing like the warm nephew who'd called me every birthday for 30 years. "I wondered if you'd call after my letter." "David, I need you to understand what really happened here. The version you heard isn't the complete story. The complete story is that you're making your pregnant daughter-in-law homeless because Marcus played a stupid prank. That's the story everyone's hearing, Aunt Helen." So that was the narrative they were spreading. The innocent prank, the overreaction, the cruel old woman punishing young love. No mention of 3 years of financial exploitation, social exclusion, or systematic disrespect. Just a simple story of a joke gone wrong and a vindictive response. I spent 20 minutes explaining the real timeline to David, the pattern of behavior that had led to this moment. I could hear his attitude shifting as he absorbed the details of missed holidays, ignored phone calls, and my gradual transformation from beloved mother to convenient ATM. "Jesus, Aunt Helen, why didn't you tell anyone this was happening?" Pride, probably, and hoped that things would get better. I kept thinking that if I just gave a little more, sacrificed a little more, Marcus would remember that he loved me. My voice cracked slightly. It took a vase full of dust for me to realize that love without respect isn't love at all. David was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions before writing that letter. The way Marcus presented it, you just snapped out of nowhere." Of course, that's how he presented it. Taking responsibility for 3 years of cruelty would make him look bad. It's easier to paint me as an unstable old woman than to admit what he's become. "What can I do to help?" The question surprised me. After a week of attacks and accusations, having someone offer support instead of judgment felt like finding water in a desert. Just don't believe everything you hear. And maybe remember that there are usually 2 sides to every family story. The house closing was scheduled for the following Friday. 5 more days of Marcus and Jennifer living in the home I'd helped them buy. 5 more days of their increasingly desperate attempts to change my mind. The real estate transaction had taken on a symbolic weight far beyond its financial significance. It represented my final declaration of independence from people who'd taken my love for granted. Thursday evening brought one last visitor to my door. Marcus stood alone on my porch. No Jennifer, no lawyers, no social workers. Just my son, looking older than his 38 years, holding a manila envelope in hands that shook slightly. "Mom, can I come in, please, just for 5 minutes?" Against my better judgment, I opened the door and led him into the living room where this had all started. He sat on the edge of my couch like he was afraid to get comfortable, the envelope clutched in his lap like a lifeline. "I brought something," he said quietly. "Something I should have given you a long time ago." He handed me the envelope, and I opened it with curious fingers. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, spanning 38 years of my life as Marcus's mother. Baby pictures where I looked exhausted but blissful, childhood birthday parties where my smile outshone the candles, school events where I stood proudly in audiences, cheering for my son's achievements. The photos told the story of a mother who'd been present for every milestone, every celebration, every moment that mattered. They showed a woman who'd loved completely and unconditionally, who'd sacrificed her own dreams to make her child's dreams possible. "I found these in my closet yesterday," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'd forgotten how much you gave up for me, how much you were always there, always supporting me, always believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Tears blurred my vision as I looked through the evidence of my own devotion. Here was the woman I'd been before financial manipulation and social exclusion had worn me down to nothing. Here was proof that I'd been a good mother, that I'd earned better than dust in a crystal vase. Mom, I know it's too late. I know the house is sold and you'll never trust me again. But I need you to know that I remember now. I remember who you were, who you've always been, and I'm ashamed of what I became. I looked up at my son through my tears, seeing glimpses of the little boy who'd brought me dandelions and called them flowers. Marcus, do you understand why I had to do this? He nodded, wiping his own eyes with the back of his hand. You had to show me what it felt like to lose something I took for granted. You had to teach me that actions have consequences, that love without respect dies eventually. He looked around my living room, the same room where he'd laughed at my humiliation just 2 weeks ago. I understand now, Mom. I just wish I'd understood sooner. So do I, sweetheart, so do I. We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, two people who'd loved each other badly finally finding a moment of honest communication. It didn't fix everything. It didn't undo 3 years of damage or erase the hurt on both sides, but it was a beginning, a foundation on which we might someday build something better. The baby, Marcus said finally. Jennifer's due in October. I want you to be part of their life if you're willing. I want them to know their grandmother, the real one, not the ATM version I created. That depends on whether you've learned anything from this experience, whether you understand that respect and gratitude aren't optional extras in family relationships. I touched one of the photographs, a picture of Marcus's college graduation where I stood beaming beside him. I'll always love you, Marcus, but I won't go back to being taken for granted. He nodded solemnly. I understand. And Mom? The dust thing, that was Jennifer's idea, but I went along with it. I thought it was funny. I actually thought humiliating you would be entertaining. His voice broke completely. What kind of person have I become? The kind who can still learn and grow, I hope. The kind who can teach his child to treat people better than he treated his mother. Marcus left that evening with promises to do better, to be better, to somehow earn back the respect he'd forfeited. Whether he'd keep those promises remained to be seen. Trust, once broken, took years to rebuild. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt hopeful that my son might remember how to be someone worth loving again. The house closed on Friday as scheduled. Sandra called at 3:30 to confirm that the papers were signed, the money had changed hands, and Marcus and Jennifer had until Sunday to complete their move. I celebrated that evening with a glass of wine and a sense of completion I hadn't felt in years. Saturday morning brought a knock on my door. Jennifer stood on my porch alone, her pregnancy just beginning to show, holding a small gift bag with shaking hands. Mrs. Patterson, I know you probably don't want to see me, but I have something for you. Curious despite myself, I accepted the bag and looked inside. It contained a small crystal ornament, nothing expensive or elaborate, just a simple decoration with "World's Best Mom" engraved in flowing script. It's not much, Jennifer said quietly, but I wanted you to have something beautiful in crystal, something that wasn't full of garbage. She looked at me with what might have been genuine remorse. I'm sorry for all of it. You deserved so much better than what we gave you. Yes, I did, I said simply. And so does your baby. They deserve parents who understand that love is about respect, not just need. Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face. I hope someday you can forgive us. I hope someday we can be the family you deserved from the beginning. As I watched her walk away, carrying my grandchild and the weight of lessons learned too late, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Not happiness exactly, but peace. The war was over, the boundaries were established, and for the first time since Robert died, I was exactly where I belonged. In my own home, on my own terms, with my dignity intact and my future secure. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to earn your love again. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the strength to demand that they try. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.